concerns diagnosing engine noises in the piston and main bearing areas. These are noises that relate to the piston itself, the wrist pin, and the connecting rod. And then we'll cover the main bearing. When you learn to recognize the engine noises in those areas, you'll be able to diagnose the problems causing them. Let's listen carefully to some specific engine noises, all of which telegraph a specific problem that can be diagnosed from both above and below the engine, and from both at idle and at 2,000 RPM. Heard from above, the CFI engine noise sounds like this when the engine's idling. And at 2,000 RPM, it sounds like this. But heard from underneath, the engine noise at idle sounds like this. And at 2,000 RPM, it sounds like this. How do you diagnose it, Roy?
Joe, I've bent over the engine and I've stood under it. I've listened while it idled, then revved it up. I'd say it's a wrist pin knock. Matter of fact, I'd stake my rep on it.
I'd say you've got it right on the nose.
How about right on the ear?
Roy diagnosed that engine noise correctly. Excessive wear on the wrist pin will cause that knock. Notice and listen. Now let's get inside the engine to see what's causing that wrist pin knock. In this case, it's excessive wear. That was the engine noise at idle. Let's rev it up and listen to the same wrist pin knock at 2,000 RPM. You may not have to check from both above and below the engine to diagnose wrist pin knock, or check at various RPM, but it's a good idea to do so. And remember, too, the abnormal wrist pin engine noise will differ somewhat in an EFI engine. Again, let's make a sound-by-sound comparison. Be sure to note and recognize the hollow sound in the EFI engine due to the aluminum rocker arm cover. Here's the wrist pin knock in a CFI engine at idle as heard above the engine. And here's the more hollow sound of the EFI. Below the engine, wrist pin knock in a CFI sounds like this. Notice the difference? While an EFI has a sound like this, like in the center of an aluminum kettle. You know, when those engines are revved up to 2,000 RPM, the wrist pin knock is going to be magnified, like you've turned the volume way up on your TV and driven your neighbors nuts. Let's listen and learn. Now let's get right into piston action. In a moment, we'll listen to the engine noise you get from piston slap, caused by excessive clearance between the cylinder wall and the piston skirt. To make a comparison, when there's too much clearance between the two, you get a resounding slap. But let's listen to the actual engine noise. We'll learn to recognize it first from above the engine and below it at idle, then from above and below at 2,000 RPM. Now let's get right inside the cylinder block and see the action. And of course, there are again notable differences between piston slap on a CFI and an EFI. Here's another sound-by-sound comparison with the engines at idle and at 2,000 RPM. Now let's diagnose a knock from a different cause. In this instance, the service technician has disconnected the fan in order to hear without the distraction of fan noise. That's important. To diagnose engine noise correctly, always tune out extraneous noises, whether in the shop area or within the vehicle itself. Now, listen to this knock. What's your diagnosis, Pete?
I'm not sure. I want to listen to it again from underneath. I think it's in a connecting rod, but I could be wrong.
Who, you, Pete? You gotta be kidding. Pete wasn't wrong. That knock came from excessive wear on connecting rod bearings, sounding like this from above the engine, and like this from underneath. And here's an inside view of those connecting rod bearings and the excessive wear that's creating the engine noise. Yes, connecting rod bearings, when worn, make a distinctly recognizable sound. Uh-oh. There's another sound we'll have to recognize to diagnose the problem. That customer's got a problem. You can hear him a half a block away. Slight exaggeration, of course. Hello. Sounds like you've got a bit of trouble.
Yeah, tell me about it. This ain't your opportunity knocking. Some drive me crazy.
Well, if you can wait a few minutes, we'll see if we can find out what it is. I'll have one of our technicians listen to it, and maybe he can diagnose the problem right away. Jim.
Yeah, 5 will get you 10, Joe. It's a main bearing. There's a lot of wear. It makes that kind of noise.
You sure about it, Jim?
That's my job. Sticking my ear into other people's business. Listen.
Let's put it up on the lift and really zero in on it.
And when there's a lot of wear, it makes that kind of knock.
When the engine's idling, Jim?
Well, you know it. But at 2,000 RPM, it really takes off.
Let's go inside and see what's happening. As you've seen and heard, today's high-tech Ford engines demand a well-trained ear for vitally important engine noise diagnosis. Careful listening adds another dimension to your other technical skills, as does regular use of your video reference book with its detailed, sound-oriented information. You've heard and seen some true-to-life situations involving diagnosing engine noises in order to learn what problems cause those noises. You've learned the importance of training your ears to recognize the often small and subtle differences between various engine noises. You have seen the causes of many of those engine noises illustrated in animation, frequently in slow motion, so that you can relate the engine noises directly to their source and see what the eye cannot see within the engine. And so you could take the necessary steps to repair or replace a part or parts, thus eliminating the warning noise. You have ear-examined those engine noises on both the 1.9-liter CFI and EFI engines, and are armed with the knowledge that engine noise diagnosis in other quality Ford engines is a similar process. Of course, practicing good engine maintenance is one way to keep engine components in top-notch condition. It's the duty and responsibility of everyone in the service department to point out to customers that keeping the oil level up, using the proper grade of oil changes, and oil filter and air cleaner changes at prescribed intervals are some of the preventive measures necessary to forestall engine problems and engine noise. But in the final analysis, you are the person your customers rely on. As Jackie Stewart points out,
your owner's respect and confidence in their vehicle's engines depends a great deal on your skill at engine noise diagnosis. The significant variations in engine sounds can lead you to the heart of a problem, so that you can assure your customers a smooth, purring, noise-free engine, the sweetest sound in all the world.